Today I am starting a very special Grand Prix with My Singing Monsters, meaning 3 Fridays in a row I'm doing 3 different My Singing Monsters videos. But the reason it's a particularly special one is because I'm actually kind of doing this in collaboration with the My Singing Monsters team. As some of you know, I've worked with them before. I did an interview on their channel where I talked about my Singing Monsters More Monstrous series, and they reached out to me again about a month ago for something that I can't actually talk about yet, but keep an eye on their channel and my channel for more details. But while talking about that, they also asked me if I wanted early access to some of the creature designs from Perplexplore, the update that came out this week. I gave an enthusiastic yes so that today we could do a 7th episode of My Singing Monsters More Monstrous, focused on the new creatures that were released. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's go!
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
I've heard it said in many ways that the more time you spend with certain people, the more like them you become. If you spend much time with angry and bitter people, you will act the same. But if you spend time around kind or loving or even somewhat mischievous people, you will also act more like them. I observed clear evidence of that in myself this week, when I once again met up with a group of beast chroniclers who call themselves the Monster Handlers. They informed me that in the waters not far from our meeting place, they'd spotted a very elusive, or as they stated, epic variant of a creature they'd researched before called the Phangler land gnasher. This one more accurately being a Phangler sea gnasher. They coincidentally sighted it ever so briefly while searching along the beaches for another creature called a mimicking tripedal. They had gotten word that a shape-shifting creature with a bird-like beak had been seen in the area, and they were desperately searching to see if it was indeed the same shapeshifter referred to in the Hymns of the Colossal's religious texts. It was believed to be extinct centuries ago, but the handlers had always held out hope that it had simply been in hiding, disguising itself as other creatures to stay hidden and safe from those who would hunt the monsters of song. I agreed to come with them the next day to search for either of these creatures, and within a few hours we'd found the tripedal. But not in a state we were eager to see it in. It was in a massive bamboo cage, unconscious but clearly breathing, being dragged by a group of pirates. We were of course ecstatic to see it in the flesh and alive, but feared it may not stay that way long. This was when I noticed the influence of my friends affecting me. Of course, I could have simply summoned a dragon ally to attack the pirates, and likely make quick work of them, but instead I came up with 2 less violent plans first. One was more diplomatic and felt very inspired by my ally Sterling. The second, my backup, felt much more similar to the kind of plan my ally Mr. Sharp might try. I first approached the pirates, hands deliberately away from my sword, and speaking in a very calm manner. I informed them of how this creature has long been believed extinct, and if we wanted its kind to be able to flourish and repopulate in our world again, they'd have to release it. I tried to appeal to their sense of decency. Unfortunately, they simply laughed and stated that they were well aware of how rare this creature was, which was exactly why they'd captured it, so they could sell it. I continued trying to convince them, until one drew his blade and tried to scare me off. That was when I fell to my more mischievous backup plan. I casually put my arms behind my back as I spoke, and slid a sleeve off of the glowing runes on my arm that give me a myriad of abilities, including control of the weather. I told the pirates that I was trying to get them to release this creature for their own good. In the moment, I concocted a story, claiming it was stated in the Hymns of the Colossal's texts, which I was quite certain they would not have read, that capturing a mimicking tripedal curses the captor. Soon after the act, they'd perpetually have violent storms following them everywhere they went. Worse still, for pirates, everywhere they sailed. As I said this, I used my runes to change the weather above. The pirates quickly took notice of how the clouds darkened and lightning crashed into the waters behind us, not far from their ship. They argued in terror for a moment, with one of the pirates about to open the cage, when another stopped him. He yelled at them that I must be changing the weather, that I was likely some kind of sorcerer. And I suppose in a sense that's not completely off. They all drew their weapons. I was about to fall back to another backup plan to summon a dragon for assistance, but before I did, through the rain, bellowing louder than the thunder, a voice boomed the word, "Huzzah!" Now, I absolutely love how this drawing turned out, and it's probably my favorite monster I've drawn in a while, except for maybe Murzawa. which was the creature that showed up in the first episode of my new mythology-based series, Mytholethal. But this one is definitely right up there. Except I will say, to critique it right off the bat, as happens a fair amount in this series, I don't know if I did quite enough to make this guy more monstrous, as the series is kind of called. Making it angrier probably would have pulled that off better, but I don't know, I wasn't as tempted to make this an angry-looking creature. There are a few little things I did, like I made its hands bonier, added more textures, added some more bumps around its eyes, and that does help make it a bit more monstrous. I also gave it like a feathery tail, which doesn't necessarily make it more monstrous, it's just an element that I like adding sometimes. If a creature doesn't have a tail, a lot of the time I like adding a tail to it for my version. I did the same thing with the Poke, which was the last My Singing Monster that I drew more monstrous, not for a full episode, but for a compilation of all my previous episodes in this series, which I'll have linked in the description or somewhere if you want to see every one that I've done before. And looking back at that one, I think it might actually be one of my favorites in this series. I don't remember what I said about it when I drew it, but I really love how it looks, and it has a big mane of feathers as well. And I would say I pulled it off pretty much the same quality-wise in this drawing to that one. I do think I have one missed opportunity here, which is that since the Mimic is a shapeshifter, I could have drawn it shapeshifting into or away from one of my favorite dragons that's set in the same world in this series, because my Turning Things into Dragon series is set in the same world as this My Singing Monster series I do. But I still really love how this drawing turned out, so maybe if they end up making a rare Mimic or epic Mimic, I can go with that for a future drawing. But anyway, I hope you all like it as much as I do. Let's take a look at the finished result. With that mighty huzzah, my eyes, those of the handlers and pirates, were all drawn up to a cliff ledge hanging over the beach nearby to see something that, frankly, I'm still not entirely sure what it was. I felt like quite the perplexed explorer trying to make sense of what I saw. It looked very human-like, even clad in sandals, armbands, and a helmet, but it had no body. Or perhaps more accurately, its body was one large head, completely covered in hair that formed into a shape like that of a Viking's beard. It leapt off the cliff, falling gracefully for 50 feet, and landed on the beach, sprinting towards us. I wasn't sure if I should have my blade raised to it or the pirates, but then I noticed that the monster handlers were practically crying happy tears at the sight of this thing. Gentleman Tyson then said, "I don't believe it. A primal Spurlor." I recognized part of that name. Spurlor scribes were written of in the Hymns of the Colossals as beings that were partway between human and monster, and were said to be the original monster handlers and researchers. But personally, I'd always assumed in reality they were simply humans that had survival and lifestyle traits of monsters from living among them for so long. I certainly hadn't expected them to look like this. None had been seen in centuries, let alone a primal one, which was said to be the most physically imposing and impressive of the lot. Which I can understand from seeing this creature storming its 10-foot-tall frame towards myself and the pirates. Some of the pirates fled upon seeing it, but the one who'd caught on to my trickery charged at the Spurlor himself and swung his sword. The bearded beast simply held its arm in the path of the swing and flexed its bicep. Without leaving a scratch, the sword bounced off its bulging muscles as it bellowed again. Huzzah! The pirate then swung at its eye, but it turned and flexed its shoulder, once more making the blade bounce off of it. The Spurlor then grabbed the pirate, lifted him into the air, and hurled him 40 feet out into the sea with another huzzah! He splashed into the water and didn't even bother trying to swim back to his captured prey. The rest of the pirates had fled by that point, so the mimicking tripedal was safe. I used my runes to shift the weather back to a sunny day and opened the monster's cage. It was still unconscious for the moment, but we'd wait there with it, with the handlers ready to play music to calm it when it awoke. I attempted to ask them to explain how exactly a creature like the primal Spurlor existed, if it was born from human and creatures breeding, or if it was its own species or an evolution of humans or monsters specifically, but the handlers were too in awe and excitement by seeing this creature to pay attention to my questions. so I eventually stopped asking and let them have their fun. As hoped, the tripedal awoke to the handler's song and was quickly at ease, and soon chanting Huzzah itself in the same voice as the Spurlor, clearly mimicking it. It was quite the experience, and all the more fun due to how much the handlers were enjoying it. And yet the day wasn't over yet. We still had one more monster left to find. You can probably tell by how I wrote the lore for this guy that I was kind of hand-waving away how silly of a creature this one is to have set in this universe. But the Epic Spurrit was one of the new additions to Perplexplore, and I wasn't going to pass up drawing it, because I knew it was going to be a fun one to do. Again, for this design, I didn't change a ton from the original to make it more monstrous. I mean, I did make this one angrier looking, and I tweaked the helmet a bit, pulling some inspiration from Thor, because this guy already gave me kind of Norse god Thor kind of vibes with his beard body thing. Then I also added more details like some teeth and some veins on his arms to make him look even more bulky and ripped. But the one most notable change I'd say I made actually leads me to a question for old Mr. Spurrit here. What are you doing skipping leg day, bud? I don't make a habit of body shaming cartoon monsters, but the other Spurrits are looking up to you, man. You gotta be a good role model for them, and yet you're walking around with arms like you do curls in your sleep, but legs that look like you haven't done calf raises since the dawn of fire. No more skipping leg day. In my redesign, I decided to make him not skip leg day. But anyway, setting this guy in a storm also felt very fitting because I was taking inspiration from Thor. He's got a bit of a Thor look, so having a thunderstorm in the back, and it ended up fitting well with the lore that I wrote. I would say of the three in this episode, this is my least favorite of the drawings, but not by very much. I'm really happy with all the drawings, and I do think this one turned out pretty cool. To our great excitement, after enjoying an hour or so of music with the mimicking tripedal, we found it was very capable of understanding basic communication. We managed to inform it that we were out to seek another monster of song in the nearby waters. Upon realizing what we were saying, it transformed itself into another aquatic monster of song, a great Jubalrus, and allowed us to hop onto its back. The primal Spurlor couldn't fit, so it left us then, but we spent the afternoon and into the evening searching the waters for the Phanglerous sea gnasher the handlers had briefly seen before. We intermittently played music, both for our own entertainment and to try and attract the creature, but by the time the moon was high in the sky, we were all losing hope that we'd find the beast that day. It was only when we quieted our instruments, thinking we were done playing for the eve, that we heard a very distant tune. It was as if it was echoing up through the water. We couldn't tell where it was coming from, but upon looking in every direction, we finally spotted a blinking blue light under the water a ways off, but headed in our direction. As it approached, the song got louder, and the peak of a purple tail could be seen swishing through the crest of the waves towards us. It reached and started circling around us, and the handlers eagerly exclaimed that this was it, the monster of song we'd sought. The handlers were all tired, but finding the beast and hearing its music gave them all a second wind. The handlers and I all wielded our instruments once more, and we played deeper into the night. The mimicking tripedal even transformed into the same creature we'd found, and sang in unison with it. Between melodies, the handlers gave me information about this creature, and I observed some of its habits myself, knowing I'd want to write them down later. The creature had over a dozen eyes, and yet it showed little sign of having strong eyesight. The handlers claimed this was because it could only see a specific spectrum of light. Outside of that, it often maneuvered by sensing the patterns of the tides and movements of the water around it. It also looked as though it would be a very deep sea creature, but apparently preferred staying near the water's surface. It likely had spent much time in the last decades deeper in the waters, but this would be to avoid being hunted, not because that was its preference. By the time we finished the next set of songs, my allies could hardly keep their eyes open. We headed back to the shore and set up camp. I left them be to head off on other adventures, but went with a deep sense of satisfaction and gratitude, having gotten to see and sing and play with three incredible creatures, all of which had likely not been seen by, or at least positively interacted with, humans in quite some time. Now, I was really stoked when I saw the design for the epic Phangler getting added in the new Perplexplore update, because I really wanted another shot at a Phangler. I have actually done the regular Phangler in a previous My Singing Monsters More Monstrous episode, and the result I thought was just okay. It looked cool enough, and I like it enough, but I didn't love it. And as people who watch this channel know, I really love monstrous anglerfish sea monster kinds of designs, even though I've put off doing a new sea monster episode for like 2 years now. But I really love those kinds of creatures, so the fact that one of the coolest creatures of that kind in My Singing Monsters, my version of it, I thought just turned out okay, meant I really wanted another shot. So this epic Phangler, which I think I like the design of even more than the original, was a perfect opportunity for me to try this again, and I really like the result. It also gave me a shot at trying another one of my drawings where part of a water creature's body is above water and part of it's underwater, but in this case, I didn't divide up the image in a way that's a bit jarring, like I have in the past. In this case, I made sure to have all of the important parts of the creature, the main focal point of the drawing, be underwater and just have a bit of its tail sticking up out of the water. So we still have that cool divide, but it's divided in a way where everything that's important is on the bottom part of the image. And we only have like the top quarter of it not underwater. I also really loved having the moon casting some light rays down into the water. I had to dull them out a bunch because I was making this guy way too bright for an underwater creature that's set at night. Even still, it's realistically way too bright. But I mean, I'm not exactly going for realism here. But still, just having even the subtle light streaks from the move coming down in, I thought looked super cool. I still think in this episode I might like the Mimic the best, but I really love this epic Phangler drawing, and I'm super glad that I got another shot at it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want more My Singing Monsters More Monstrous, as I mentioned, I have a whole compilation of all of my previous episodes that'll link in the description and the cards. And make sure you're subscribed to see the next 2 My Singing Monsters videos I have coming, and other cool stuff I have coming on this channel. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is one of Bob Proctor's success principles, which is to feel the fear and do it anyway. Fear is never a good reason not to do something you feel driven to do, but if we let it, it can hold us back. I mentioned recently that I started teaching myself to do trampolining tricks, and when I was trying to psych myself up to do a backflip, I was terrified, but I was determined to be able to do it, and when I finally did it, I realized backflips are kind of the easiest flip you can do on a trampoline, and now I love doing them. Anyway, I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday, which is finally another Bayou Night Vigilance episode focusing on Junko Inoue.